Welcome back to our lecture series. We've seen that climate is a systemic risk and how supervisors try to measure it. Now, in Part C, we turn to what they actually do about it, the prudential regulation and the disclosure rules. This is the architecture, the scaffolding that's been erected around climate risk, and it contains one of the most heated technical debates in all of finance, whether the capital rules that keep banks safe should be bent to serve climate policy. Start with microprudential supervision, the oversight of individual banks. The core principle supervisors have adopted is the one we met earlier. They now expect banks to manage climate as a driver of their existing risks, credit, market, operational, rather than as some separate, exotic category. The European Central Bank set out its supervisory expectations in a 2020 guide, and the effect is that climate now has to enter a bank's governance, its strategy, and its internal capital adequacy assessment process, the core exercise where a bank judges how much capital it needs. What tools do supervisors have to enforce this? They work through what's called Pillar 2, the supervisory review process, using qualitative requirements, demanding banks improve their risk management, and potentially capital add-ons for banks that manage climate risk poorly. The key thing to grasp is the philosophy. Climate is being treated as a risk driver within the existing prudential framework, not as a reason to tear up the rulebook and start again. Supervisors are folding climate into the machinery they already have. Now the big contentious debate, and I want you to understand both sides because it's genuinely hard. The question, should capital charges be lower for green loans, a green supporting factor, or higher for brown loans, a brown penalizing factor? The intuitive appeal is obvious. Use the capital rules to make banks lend more green and less brown, and you've turned prudential regulation into a climate weapon. But here's the powerful counter-argument, the risk-based view. Capital requirements exist to reflect risk, not to pursue policy goals. And crucially, green is not automatically safe. A loan to a solar startup can be far riskier than a loan to an established oil major. If you cut capital on green loans that are actually risky, you make the bank less safe. You've sacrificed financial stability for climate policy, which is not what capital rules are for. There's sharp academic backing for this caution. Oemke and Opp, in forthcoming work, show that capital requirements are an inferior tool to a carbon tax for the job of cutting emissions. The logic is clean. If you want to cut emissions, price carbon directly. Don't distort the bank safety rules to do a job they're bad at. Using prudential rules to steer credit confuses two different objectives, keeping banks safe and fighting climate change. Most supervisors have so far come down on the risk-based side. Capital should reflect climate only insofar as climate genuinely affects risk, no more, no less. But the debate is far from over. Beyond individual banks lies the macroprudential question, the stability of the system as a whole. And here, climate has a special character we established earlier. It's system-wide and correlated. Everyone is exposed to the same fossil fuel and real estate risks at the same time, so institutions can fail together. That's precisely a macroprudential concern, the kind that ordinary bank-by-bank supervision misses. What tools might address it? Candidates include systemic risk buffers, extra capital for the system as a whole, concentration limits on carbon-intensive exposures, capping how much any bank or the system can pile into brown assets, and other sectoral measures. The aim is to limit the buildup of correlated system-wide climate exposures before they become a green swan. But I have to be honest, this toolkit is still largely experimental. It is not yet settled. Regulators are actively debating and piloting these ideas, but none has become standard practice. So macroprudential climate policy is very much a work in progress. The theory is clear, the tools are sketched, but the settled framework doesn't yet exist. Zoom out to the global level, where the Basel Committee sets the rules that national supervisors adapt. In 2022, the Basel Committee issued Principles for the Management and Supervision of Climate-Related Financial Risks, a global template. And it has been consulting on adding climate risk disclosures to Pillar 3, the part of the Basel framework that governs what banks must publicly reveal. But notice the deliberate approach. The Basel Committee has chosen to work within the existing Basel III framework rather than build a separate climate capital regime. This is the same philosophy again. Integrate climate into what exists. Don't create a parallel system. The virtue of Basel involvement is global coordination, a common standard so that banks worldwide face broadly similar expectations. The weakness is uneven national adoption. Basel sets principles, but each country decides how hard to apply them. And as we'll see, the political will to do so varies enormously across the Atlantic. So there's a global framework, but it's a soft one, unevenly enforced. Underpinning all of this regulation is information, because you cannot manage or price what isn't disclosed. So let's map the disclosure architecture, which has been converging impressively. It began with the TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, in 2017, which set the enduring template, report on 4 pillars: governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. That framework was so successful, it became the global standard. Then, in 2023, the new International Sustainability Standards Board, the ISSB, consolidated it into a global baseline. Its standards, IFRS 1 and S2, giving the world a single common language for sustainability reporting. On top of that global baseline, the European Union adds more: its reporting directive, the CSRD, and the EU taxonomy. And banks specifically also report climate risk under Pillar 3 ESG templates from the European Banking Authority. The key idea to hold on to: disclosure is the information backbone of the entire framework. Every stress test, every capital decision, every investor choice depends on this data existing and being comparable. Get disclosure right, and everything else becomes possible. Get it wrong, and the rest is built on sand. Finally, a conceptual distinction that sits at the heart of the transatlantic divide: single versus double materiality. Single materiality, adopted by the ISSB and the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, asks just one question: how does climate affect the firm's value? It's investor-focused, an outside-in view, looking at how the world's climate risks flow into the company's financial position. That's the global baseline, IFRS 2. Double materiality, adopted by the European Union in its CSRD, adds a second question: how does the firm affect the world? It's stakeholder-focused, combining the outside-in view with an inside-out one. The company's own impact on the climate and society. So Europe demands a wider scope and therefore much more data. This isn't a dry technicality, it's a genuine philosophical fork. The Anglo-American view says, tell investors what climate does to your money. The European view says, tell everyone both what climate does to you and what you do to the planet. That difference, narrow and investor-focused versus broad and stakeholder-focused, is exactly the fault line, along which, as we'll see next, the whole field is now splitting politically. Let's recap. Supervisors treat climate as a driver of existing risks, using microprudential tools like Pillar 2. The fierce debate over green or brown capital factors mostly resolves for now in favor of the risk-based view. Capital should reflect risk, not policy, with Oehmke and Opp arguing a carbon tax is the better tool. Macroprudential climate tools remain experimental. Basel integrates climate into Basel III rather than building a separate regime. And disclosure is converging from the TCFD to the global ISSB baseline, with Europe adding double materiality. In the next video, we enter the politics, the European Union's omnibus rollback, greenwashing supervision, and whether ESG rules could themselves create systemic risk. See you there.